What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share and you're interested in being on the show, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. And when I say paranormal, I mean anything. Cryptid, UFO, ghosts, anything supernatural. I want to hear it. The amount of support you guys have been giving me over the last few weeks has been absolutely incredible. I want to thank everybody who subscribed, liked, commented, and shared out the podcast. You know, that's what keeps me going. That's what makes it all worthwhile. I'd like to give a shout out to the Cryptid Creatures Show. They had me on for an episode. It aired on June 8th. And that is my rake encounter. I'd also like to thank Remember That podcast. That episode aired on June 13th. And I sat in on a panel where we discussed Friday the 13th Part 3. I'll put links to both shows down in the description, but make sure you're showing them some love too. Make sure you're checking out the descriptions on all my videos. You'll notice down below, there's a list of all my favorite podcasts. I got to give a special shout out to Nevermore Hollows, because now I do voices on there too. So if you haven't gotten enough of John Cougar Hunter Methenkamp, you can find him on Nevermore Hollows as well. Once again this week I struggled joining the intro, so be looking out at the end of the episode for a few bloopers, and make sure you leave me a comment down below whether you even like the bloopers or not. That way I know whether to even save these things. Tonight's show is a good one. We have Todd Neiss. He's a Bigfoot experiencer and researcher, and our interview lasted well over 2 hours, so this will be a 2-part episode. Part 1 dropping this week and Part 2 dropping next week. So make sure you're subscribed so you get that notification so you can hear Part 2. And with that, let's start the show.
Out in the woods, shadows creep slow. Footprints deep where no man should go. Cold winds howl through hollers and brooks. Whispers of Bigfoot in the way it looks. Myths, monsters, and mullets in the night. Under a pale moon, strange glowing light. Truth out there like a blade it cuts. Myths, monsters, and mullets run amok.
Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp. On tonight's show, we have Todd Neiss, and I really need to thank Matthew from the Drunken Cryptids for suggesting even talking to you, because, as you know, I'm really new in the podcasting world, so making these connections sometimes is tough, but as much crap as I give Matthew, he has been a good friend. So Todd, why don't you introduce yourself and let my viewers know a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the show. And just by way of introduction, I'm Todd Neiss. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. I spent better part of 60 years of my life growing up in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a avid outdoorsman, have been all my life. My dad took us out in the wilderness quite a bit to do fishing and hiking, and we've even climbed a mountain or two. I've done hunting quite a bit, different types of hunting. So I'm out there quite a bit. I love the outdoors, I really do, and Oregon's a beautiful country to do it in. So that's how I kind of roll over there, and now I'm in Arkansas. I have, I did 20 years, a little over 20 years, serving in the Army, having recently retired. I do hold a degree in multidisciplinary studies from Grantham University, and with that, I guess I should just kind of segue into how I got involved if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. I know I've heard I'd heard your encounter before. I think on Sasquatch Chronicles, and I didn't put two and two together until I actually saw you do the town hall with Drunken Cryptids. I was like,
oh, really?
I do remember that story. Yeah.
Yeah, Wes Germer and Woody Pratt, his cousin. We've done a couple of shows actually. Been a while, and both of them have come out to my very exclusive private conference I hold every year called Beachfoot. We can get into that a little bit later, but they've both attended that as well. But yeah, that's some great guys, and yeah, so interesting, small world, huh?
Yeah.
But to get to move forward, I have to admit that I know a lot of people have come to know a lot of people, literally thousands of people who call themselves Bigfoot believers, and I was not. Even growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I get that. I get it. You hear Bigfoot, Sasquatch, all that stuff, but I had really kind of wrote it off as like any urban legend, I guess, a campfire tale to keep kids in line or whatever, a ghost story, what have you. But I didn't put any credence in it, mainly because of all the time I spent in the wilderness, and I've never seen anything like that, and nor had I seen any sign. But then, to be fair, I never looked for sign of something I didn't believe exists. I mean, it'd be like going out in the woods looking for dinosaur tracks. It just didn't make sense. So all of that to lead up to what changed for me. On April 3rd of 1993, as a soldier, a combat engineer in the Oregon Army National Guard at the time, we were conducting explosives training in the Oregon Coast Range, way up in about the farthest northwest corner of Oregon you can get. We had special permission to use some private timberland due to the danger involved, and these weren't small explosions. These were hundreds of pounds of C4 or ammonium nitrate, some big booms. I mean, miniature earthquake, mushroom cloud stuff. So we had 3 sites that day to blast at. These are gravel quarries on that private land. The first one we did cutting charges where we would cut steel I-beams to simulate taking down a bridge, right? The second one, we had a mock minefield, anti-tank mines, if you will, surface-laid mines that our job, which like it would be in the field, would be to not take out the minefield, but to blast a lane through that field so that our troops could get through that. The third and final site was a cratering charge, and this is where we would take, in this case, ammonium nitrate, about 250 pounds, that we soaked in diesel fuel for several hours. If you recall the Murrow Building, Oklahoma City deal, that where it took the whole front end off that building, that's ammonium nitrate. It's extremely powerful. So to blow a road in half to deny the enemy use for that's it's a no-brainer. So we'd blasted at the first 2 sites. We moved on to the third and final site. We got our ammonium nitrate in the ground, set our blasting caps, lit the fuses, got in our rigs and convoyed out of there, as you would imagine, to a safe distance to where we could await the explosion and then go back and check our work. So this is kind of where it gets dicey. I was a passenger sitting behind a driver in a Humvee. We were the second of 5 vehicles. 2 Humvees up front, 2 Humvees in back. In the middle, we had a troop transport we called Deuce and a Half or 2.5 ton truck full of soldiers in a covered truck. Anyway, not having to focus on this narrow, winding logging road like the driver and his partner up front, I had the liberty of enjoying the view, if you will. It was a nice day, especially in April in the Coast Range, Oregon's. We were in a rainforest, but it was a beautiful day. So I had the window down, and I hunted that area. I lived in that area. I hunted it every year for deer and elk. So it was just natural for me to look about the countryside and look for wildlife. Well, we rounded this corner, this really long, sweeping right-hand corner. And as we did the second blast site, the one we had detonated, the minefield thing I told you about maybe an hour earlier, it comes into view. And I look down there, and I see these three figures standing right out in the open in the gravel pit itself. I mean, literally where we had detonated several hundred pounds of C4 an hour earlier. And my first notion was, oh my God, what are those people doing down there? Because as you can imagine, we have very strict protocols. Our standard operating procedure was that everybody had to be accounted for. Everybody had to be within eyesight of each other. We didn't send people onesie twosies, helter skelter. But yet here's these three figures standing down there, and the more I looked at it, because my concern, because we had not just one but two layers of security to make sure civilians didn't happen to wander into that area. And frankly, who would? I mean, imagine if you're out in the woods and all of a sudden you hear this horrific explosion, and then you look off to the west and there's a big mushroom cloud. Are you going to walk toward that? And then you hear another one maybe an hour later. And then, of course, we had this one that was about to go off. You wouldn't walk into that area. I mean, that's just nuts. But there they were. And I'm thinking, how did they get past? And then I looked. I'm like, oh, damn. Those aren't people. Those aren't human. And by that, several things come to mind. One, they were very dark. They were black. I mean, bright sunny day, not a stitch of clothing on them, and you'd be able to make it out. In fact, if we were down there not an hour earlier in our ACUs, and you would have been able to make out the boots, the trousers, not they were black from head to foot. That number one. Number two, the size. These things were just disproportionately too big to be people. By that, I'd say. Now again, there were three of them, right? So kind of like my fingers here. The one in the middle was the tallest of the three. I'm guessing probably close to 9 feet high. The other two were not in any way short. They came up to the shoulders of the bigger one in the middle, and I estimated they were at least 7 feet high. But we're talking like 4 feet across at the shoulders. I mean, just massive. And they all built like bodybuilders. I mean, the traps just looked like you couldn't really make out a neck per se. These trapezoid muscles just went from like the base of their ears straight out to their shoulders, like you would imagine a champion, Olympic bodybuilder. Barrel chested, which tapered down to a little bit narrower waist. But it was the arms and legs. Now that's what threw me, because the arms hung down to their knees. And I don't suspect that these things were bent over at all. I think they were standing perfectly erect. But these arms, just incredibly long. And the legs, too. The legs were, again, disproportionate, ratio-wise to a human torso. So, but the final nail in the coffin, if you will, was the activity By that I mean that one in the middle, that biggest, the biggest of the three, stood there like a statue. That one did not move. I didn't make out any movement, but I could clearly see it. You got to imagine too, that rock, that gravel quarry is made up of basalt, and basalt is a light gray, almost like a cement gray, if you will. These things were jet black, so the contrast between the backdrop of the light gray and these dark figures, these black figures in the forest, really made them stand out. But again, that one in the middle stood there perfectly still. The two on either side of it, however, from the moment I saw them until I lost sight of them, and we're talking a total of approximately 25 seconds. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but look at your watch for 25 seconds. And imagine what seeing what I'm seeing. It seemed like an eternity. But the two on either side of this bigger one were rocking back and forth like this. I mean, the shifting foot from weight from one foot to the other, if you will. And these long pendulous arms were swinging down at their knees. Both of them were engaged in that. Well, that one in the middle was just like and I don't know why. I've talked to primatologists. They've told me that that's common in primates when they're anxious or excited, that they will make that sort of a rocking motion. My guess is that one in the middle was probably more mature than the two that were accompanying it, and I'm guessing by their own protocol, especially a mature one, that's kind of their MO, is that you don't move. If you're in sight of us humans, Homo sapiens, I should say, the trick is stand perfectly still, and you're not going to be seen. But for whatever reason, these two maybe adolescent ones didn't have the same control. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm just speculating. But anyway, so I watched this whole thing unfold in front of me, and then 25 seconds goes by. We round a corner, and I lost sight of them, and it wasn't far. A few 200-300 yards before we reached that safety staging area I spoke of. And being the second of 5 vehicles, I just instinctively jumped out of my Humvee and started jogging back up in the direction we just came, knowing that I had a little bit of time as the other 3 vehicles were coming in behind us. I went as far as I dared, and again, like I said, we had to have 100% accountability. Everybody had to stay within eyesight, and I knew I'd get in trouble if I, disappeared from the group. I went as far as I could, unfortunately, because I wanted to get another view. I was dying to get another view, and unfortunately, this little knoll, if you will, was blocking my direct view of that site. So I'm standing there with my hand up to my forehead, looking off in the distance and straining to see whatever I could see. And I hear somebody call my name, and I look to my right, and it's Sergeant Martin. He says, Neiss, what are you looking at? And I shook my head. I said, nothing. I got nothing. And he kept coming up my direction. Meanwhile, the last of the trucks are rolling in behind us. He gets right up to where I'm at. I remember he was smoking on a cigarette, and he said, I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at the second blast site. And I'm thinking, oh, dear God, please tell me what I hope you're going to say. But, of course, I'm like, I don't know, Jeff. What did you see? I wasn't going to say it. Maybe he saw an elk. I don't know. I didn't want to really admit to it, like so many eyewitnesses. And he kind of, I remember he looked left and right, make sure nobody was within earshot. He looked at me square in the eyes and said, well, I saw 3 huge hair-covered, Bigfoot, I guess. And, of course, at that, I'm like, dude, yeah, I saw him too. and it was kind of cool to know that somebody else had, shared that experience. As far as corroboration is concerned, I mean, that was nice, but it certainly, even without it, wouldn't have changed that situation for me. I can't unsee what I saw, and I went from a absolute non-believer to a knower, if you will, at that point. It's kind of funny because people, I almost all the time are like, "So you believe in Bigfoot?" And I'm like, "No." They're, "Oh, I thought." I'm like, "No, I don't believe in it." It was like me asking you, "Do you believe in that dog over there?" I mean, that's a stupid question, but
Right.
I know they exist, and those. What blows me away really is how those 25 seconds has completely changed the course of my life. It everything almost comes back to that moment. The where I've lived, what I've done, who I've met, who I've married, everything seems to come back to those 25 seconds. It's really been a driving force in my life, and so I've set about to try to make some sense of it, to try to find some purpose in it. I think back, what the odds were. We could have been there coming through there 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later. They might not have been there. I could have been distracted talking to the passenger up in the front seat. A lot of things had to come together to make that moment happen the way it did. And so in looking for a purpose, for me, it's twofold. One is personal, very personal, and that is I really, it's almost like a blessing and a curse, because once you see them, once is never enough. It's like seeing God and all of a sudden, whoop, there he's gone. Dang it. It's crazy how it affects you. So it's personal, but I think on a more serious level, it's scientific, I guess, is if that's the right word. The purpose for me that I have come to wrap my arms around is the conservation part of things, that the protection for a species that, with all seriousness, we do not know the health of the species. We do not know, for instance, how many exist today. Nobody can tell you that. Nobody. And I'd estimate probably a few thousand spread out over a long ways across North America. Not just the U.S., Canada and Alaska, all that. That's a lot of real estate for a few thousand things to hide. But more to the point, how many were there 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago? We don't know what direction the population is going. And so for me, I couldn't really go to my grave knowing that I didn't do something with that blessing, if you will, that happened to me. I want to make sure that as long shot as it is, that my kids, my grandkids, will have the same opportunity that I maybe did something to affect the course of in whatever small way I can, affect the reality of their existence, and the seriousness that has long been neglected for a number of reasons, and we can get into that. So that was the long version of how I got involved, and like I say, it's been an amazing journey ever since. So there you go.
So do you think that you say it was your sergeant or whatever that came up and asked you, did you happen to see those things? Do you feel like he had already had an encounter, like he already knew they existed?
Oh, no, not at all. Jeff was just as surprised as I was. But yeah, we were both like, oh my God. But no, I know in talking with him, and we've kept in touch over the last 32 years. And neither one of our stories have changed. Our accounts are dead on in the details, and they are slightly different. Jeff saw them in a little bit different window of time, and I say that, and I don't mention this very often. Nobody's ever asked, but when we had time later to talk about it after the fact, Jeff described seeing them walking. I did not see that. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "When I saw them, they were walking out of that gravel quarry." And what's interesting is his description, because it's the classic description, and this very smooth, graceful, gliding sort of locomotion, similar to that of a cross-country skier, if you will, right? Where they're just shuffling their feet along the ground. It doesn't seem something in their body mechanics, their locomotion. They don't have that telltale head bounce that we do, that head bob as we walk. It's just very linear like this. And he said one thing I'll never forget. He said they weren't running, but in very few steps they ate up a lot of real estate. And as time's gone on, that seems to really fit the narrative of most people. I'm like, yeah, okay. But so in trying to figure out what time frame, when he saw them versus when I saw them, because they stood there like I told you, one, like a statue, and the two doing the rocking back and forth thing. And this gets really interesting because we were on two different teams. Jeff was part of the heavy equipment section, and they were tasked to stay one step ahead of us, right? So, for instance, when we got to that first blasted site, where we had those steel I-beams that we had to blast in half with C4, steel I-beams don't grow out in the woods. They had come up and placed them there, and then we came in to do our thing. They moved on up to the second site, where they would place these inert training mines in this mock minefield that, again, once they set up that scenario, we would come in and do our thing. At that point, they were going up to that third site, and with a small excavator digging a little starter hole, if you will, a little pit for us to do that, to put that ammonium nitrate in. So as it turns out, couple interesting things. It's kind of funny. I really have not discussed this in probably over 100 podcasts, but it's important. I think details are so important. When I talk to people that have sightings, I want, when they start going into details like I am here, which seem completely extraneous to the sighting, I know they're telling the truth. Because why would you talk about, mom and dad unpacking the sandwiches at the picnic table at the park, and they were peanut butter and jelly and blah, blah, blah. You don't go into that kind of, it's like, there they were, But anyway, back to our story. So, timing-wise, Jeff said that we had set the charges at that second site, the minefield, blew it up, and then they went up ahead of us with the small excavator to dig that hole while we were still down at that safety area. And that's when Jeff saw them. That's when he saw them walking. Because when he told me they were walking, I'm like, whoa, back it up. They weren't walking. Oh, yeah, they were. Okay, when did you see them? So it turns out Jeff saw them nearly 20 minutes before I did. and he saw them walking, whether they were walking into the site or out of the site. I'm not sure, but yeah, when he said, yeah, they were walking, and in that again, that classic description, I'm like, okay, back up the bus. Where were we? Where was I when that was going on? So you're getting an exclusive. Um, and yeah, he said, well, you guys were still waiting for us to come back down to let you know we got the site prepped. So yeah, so there's that. But anyway.
So you were there the entire time that they were there.
Oh, they were, put it the other way. They were there the entire time. We were there. And then, so people ask me, they're like, do you think some of them were injured or even killed in your explosion? And I'm like, nah, I don't, I'm sure a few squirrels bit the dust, it had to be, some collateral damage, but I said, I don't, and then I started thinking about it. And here's another interesting little detail that I don't generally talk about. So I was a squad leader, Sergeant E5. So I had several troops that worked under me. So my job is to train them and make sure they're doing their job right. And this, after all, that's what this was training. So I'm teaching these guys how to insert a blasting cap into a 1.25 pound block of C4, how close to put it to the mine, how to run det cord into the ring main, clip into the ring main, and blah blah blah. So as we're doing that, what we're taught to train as if we're literally in a live combat situation. So that includes light discipline if it's nighttime. You don't want the enemy to spot you. Noise discipline for sure, day or night. You don't want them to hear you. Even trash litter discipline. You don't want to leave any evidence behind that we were there. Pick up everything. There's all kinds of little nuances that you got to be aware of. And so imagine I'm setting my own charges. My guys we're all down on our knees, bent over these mines, putting the blasting caps into the C4, putting them within 6 inches of the mine. And all of a sudden I heard this sound that was like, whoop! And I looked up and I was about ready to chew some ass. Because there goes the noise discipline, right? And I looked up, all of my boys are down on their knees, still doing their thing, and I didn't know who to pick. I'm like, okay, which one of you? But then, in hindsight, when I thought about it, it seemed to me that noise came from farther back into the woods. It was loud enough, really, that I thought it was them. It was just a really shrill kind of a whoop sound, and I thought, what the hell's wrong with my troop, But when I looked up, nobody was goofing off, nobody was doing anything, and so you got to wonder, were they watching us? Were they in proximity after we pulled out of there, after maybe observing us? After we pulled out of there, did they move into the area? Thinking, okay, they're gone, let's go check out what they were up to? I hope not. But I can't explain that really loud, shrill whoop sound. That, again, now, mind you, this is an hour before I ever saw it.
Podcasting isn't always easy. And at this point in the interview, I lost all the video from Todd. I was still able to recover all the audio. So from this point on, and part 2, it'll be audio only. I do apologize. Sometimes things like this happen.
Before I ever saw it. So I'm still in the whole non-believer camp at this point. It's like BS, this stuff, I'm not even thinking Bigfoot. But again, in hindsight, when people ask me, do you think any of them might have got hurt or killed, I kind of shrugged it off and I went, well, I do remember that kind of weird, unexplained noise that seemed to come out of the wood line behind, beyond my troops. So I don't know. I don't know. And then the question comes up, you know, when you would think anybody would think that when you're creating a minor earthquake in the vicinity of that area and sending rocks and debris for probably a quarter mile in every direction and a mushroom cloud going up 2,000 feet in the air. I mean, you could see it from miles away and hear it. And if you were anywhere within a mile of it, you felt it. You would think any animal, any species, I don't care, deer, squirrel, elk, bear, cougar, whatever, are going to go 360 degrees away, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That what animal, or for that matter, like we talked about earlier, what human would have the gonads to go march right into that area where obviously some very traumatic, dangerous explosions are going on, but yet there they were. Which, and I've had people poo-poo it because they're like, oh, that's bullshit. Nobody would ever. That doesn't even make sense. Why would they come into an area where you're doing that kind of stuff and literally right on the spot where you'd been? And I had to think about it, and I've come to the conclusion that we were being observed. There's no question. We were being observed the whole time. I think once that explosion was over, and keep in mind, an hour had passed. And I'm still thinking any animal that lived within a mile of that area was staying well clear of that area. Again, because this wasn't the one and only. That we had done two of these big blasts, and we still had another one cooking off. But an hour had passed, and apparently that was long enough for these individuals to overcome any fear factor, if you will. Doesn't sound reasonable to you, like I said, even for a human. I don't. If I was out there backpacking, somehow I got through the security, I would not be walking into a blast zone. But yet they did, and so to me, it was a product of curiosity. Now stay with me. Curiosity is the need to know, the need to understand, to make sense of what happened, and especially something that was not natural. The need to know, to me, spells intelligence. I don't think a squirrel or a deer is going to go, you know what? That was really weird. I think I really need to go back there and check out and see what's going on, because I need to know. But the fact that they, put it this way, we piqued their curiosity to the point that their need to know overwhelmed their fear factor. And they came in, at least three of them that we know of, came into that area. They knew we had left the area. I think they probably assumed that activity where they were at was done. And they were watching us. They were observing us. They wanted to know where'd they go now? Okay, there they are. They're across the ravine. They're driving those confounded machines, and they're and they were what? They were scouts, maybe. I don't know. They were observing us anyway. And but yeah, there's a few details I had not really talked about, but.
When you bring up,
Yeah, but I do believe they're very intelligent, at least in the sense of survival. There's a difference. People ask me, about their intelligence, like like I've sat down and we've talked about it, me and Bigfoot. But certainly I've considered it, and we talk about it, and I think intelligence comes in different flavors, if you will, and not one any more or less valuable than the other. And so when we think of intelligence with regards to us Homo sapiens, we have a standard a measure we call IQ, which is intelligence quotient. We have a test that you can take, and whatever score you get today, I mean, just think even 200 years ago, nobody would have passed that sucker. But because it's built on technical academics, calculations, and what have you. So does that mean they're stupid? No, they're smart in their own right. I've come up with, I've coined a phrase where what we call IQ, I call academic intelligence quotient, or AIQ. What I would say they have, and they have it in spades, is PIQ, and that's primal intelligence quotient. Does that make them stupider than us? No. Does that make them better than us, or us better than them? No. It's a different brand of intelligence, and frankly, it's the PIQ within the human species. Well, I got to keep saying Homo sapiens species because we are part of the Homo genus, but I do believe they are as well. I've come to that conclusion based on my study of evolution and their body mechanics and how humans of the 13, 14 now varieties of the 14 iterations of the Homo species, the first five couldn't even walk upright. So, and no primates of the say the great ape variety ever walked upright. So, to me, that puts them squarely into the Homo genus. Homo sapiens would be what we call modern humans. Uh, I think it's important to make that distinction. But we had that PIQ. We needed that PIQ when we were Homo Neanderthal or Homo Cro-Magnon, Heidelbergensis. You didn't have PIQ, you died. You had to know how to hunt, how to forage, how to gather. And we have traded that because of something, and I don't know what triggered that in the Homo sapiens species, but we got smacked upside the head with an intelligence stick that took us in a whole different direction than all the rest of the Homo species. But it's been one of those, again, a blessing and a curse because as we advance in our academics and in technology, we are over time trading that PIQ that even seriously think 200-300 years ago, if you didn't know how to hunt, you didn't eat. You'd be eating you'd be a vegetarian, or you better know a farmer or a hunter because otherwise you're going to be eating a lot of roots and whatever. So even 200-300 years ago, the pioneers right here in Arkansas, where I'm at now, it was rough. But over the last 200-300 years, as technology's advanced, our PIQ continually is diminished, and it probably to our detriment. Uh, Preppers know this real well. I got a bug out bag. I'm in the. I kind of try to keep my one leg in the shit. It's a fan class. But again, a lot of that I learned in the military. But you need to keep those survival skills because I'll put it this way: people go, oh well, they're just smart monkeys or whatever, and they got it down on a primal level, but that just makes them dumber than us. I'll tell you what. Our technology will be the end of us. Case in point, one EMP exploded over the United States would wipe out our entire power grid. And I guarantee you within a month, you'd start seeing the Homo sapien population start dropping. Within 6 months, probably a quarter of us would be starving, and and freezing and what have you. Within 5 years, more than half of us would be gone. Ask yourself how an EMP would affect a Bigfoot.
It wouldn't.
It'd be like it's another day.
Yeah.
So now who's smarter? Excuse me?
Right. But
We want to talk about intelligence. Who's more intelligent? Oh, they win, we lose. So we gotta make sure that we make that distinction between the brand, if you will, or the classification of intelligence. I don't think they're stupid. I think they're incredibly smart, and frankly, I think their view of us runs along those same lines. I think that's exactly why they stay the hell away from us. For the longest time, a good 30,000 years, they lived symbiotically with Native Americans. They talk about them at length. Their this symbiotic relationship, that they used to work, communicate with each other. They used to supposedly have powwows, if you will, where they would, like on an annual basis or semi-annual basis, they would have some meet and greets, if you will. And when the Europeans, the Western culture, came in to be, 16, 1700s, and just started spreading across the United States, and in the process, pretty much decimating the earlier version of Homo sapiens that were technologically inferior. These things said, we're done. And we will no longer come and visit you. We will no longer, we can't. It's been fun. But this whole new version of your kind is going to spell we're not going to go the way you're going. We're going to survive, and good luck. And we'll be out there, but we're not coming back. And so it's that PIQ that enables them to evade us and to maintain their privacy, and which is interesting as we encroach more and more into their territory. I think that's where we end up having these encounters, and I dare say probably 90% of those encounters, at least 90% of those encounters, are not us finding them. It's us discovering that they've been watching us, and it's like, oh, they saw us, and then their MO at that point is turn around and walk off. That's pretty much what they do. Once they realize they've been compromised, it's like, crap, But they have the capability to hear, smell, see us long before we ever know they're there. And if we do happen to catch a glimpse of us because one of them screwed up, or they just got too inquisitive and didn't know better, they saw, again, that the need to know, that curiosity. I think they watch us quite a bit. I think they learn from us, and I think the biggest lesson they walk away from us is not to be like us, because that sort of inquisitiveness and that level of intelligence would really spell their undoing in the long run. But I mean, it'd be like if aliens really landed somewhere in the middle of Arkansas. After a little while, after, I don't know, 300-400 years, we know they're still out there. We're gonna like, hey, you want to go see the aliens? Let's go check them out. But again, you're gonna still have that respect for their technological advance and the fact that they could, have their way with you if you got too close. But I think it's kind of similar analogy is imagine living 300 years with aliens. We're the ones now back in the wilderness, but there's going to be times where we're going to like, hey, let's go get up on them and see what they're doing. Let's check it out. It's natural, right?
Right.
So, but I think that's the times. Those are the times they get seen is when they compromise themselves. But otherwise, they don't need us. They don't really want anything to do with us. They're curious, and for that reason, they get caught. once in a while.
Yeah. And you were talking about the curiosity thing. Maybe, I mean, I see, we just had tornadoes and stuff go through here in Indiana. You guys had them down there. What's the first thing everybody does after the tornado goes through? You go out and you start
Go home,
investigating,
check it out.
go look at it. So maybe that's what they were
It's
doing.
that morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they,
Well, yeah, and that's a good analogy because we just exploded a huge ordinance right there in the middle of it would be a uh, one of those drive-by things that people just morbid curiosity. A plane, like if a plane crashed somewhere in the neighborhood, it's
right.
like hey, let's go see what where that plane crashed. It's human instinct to be curious and to even though you realize it's a traumatic situation. The more traumatic, I guess, the more interesting it might be. So yeah, you might be onto something there.
Yeah.
The fascination that is just hard to walk away from.
Right. But you do hear, it seems like a lot of the encounters that I hear, it sounds like they're just the creatures are just being curious, and like you said, oh crap, we got caught, and then
Yeah.
it becomes a little more sometimes, but most of the ones that I hear, it's like they're looking at you, like not really doing anything. They're just kind of looking at you until you see them, and then, or I guess you do get the ones where they're pacing you out or whatever, but it's still like,
Well, escorting would be the word, I think. I've heard of a number. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry,
oh, you're fine.
but I've heard of numerous. See, generally, the MO is okay when they've been compromised, that they realize that they've been spotted, uh, is to leave. Uh, Game over. In some cases, there have been some situations that are somewhat more aggressive. I've heard of cases where, kind of what you mentioned, it being them clearly making their presence known and using that to drive you out of the area. And my guess is in situations like that, uh, if they were out in the middle of nowhere in some open expanse, probably wouldn't happen. But if they have, say, family members or a clan close by, or maybe even a fresh kill of some sort, you can see where they're like, no, not in my neighborhood. Get along, and just kind of march you out of there. I remember one investigation I did. Uh, uh, it's kind of unusual along those lines. There was a guy, this is back in Oregon, a guy that was an amateur rock hound, and in the summers when the water levels dropped, he knew that there was a river called Roaring River that's part of the Clackamas River watershed, where he knew that there was a lava flow that crossed through this creek bed, and as the water dropped, it exposed more of that lava flow during the summer, and he was aware that embedded in that lava was what he called common opal. So he would go up there with his dog and his chisel, his little metal chisel and metal hammer and a little collection sack, and they'd hike in there. It's a very rough hike in. Used to be a trail, but it washed out in a flood. So very, very, a mile in would take you 45 minutes of pretty hard trekking. But he's in there. His dog, which was a Australian Shepherd, he had let the dog wander around, and while he's doing this, so he's down on the river, tink, 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 tink. You can imagine metal on metal, unusual sound in the middle of the woods, especially a mile in. Well, the dog started alerting to something and was starting to growl and bark, but it didn't even bark really. It was just growling and growling and growling, and he figured he had a squirrel or a raccoon or something, and but it just didn't stop. And he's like, hell with it, he's gonna go check it out. So he set down his hammer and his chisel and he left that in his collection bag there, and walked up to where the dog was to see what the dog was so, excited about. And he said he looked in the direction the dog was focused on, and he said he didn't say Bigfoot. That's one thing I'll never forget, because I've never heard anybody say this. But the guy said, I looked in the direction my dog was looking, and standing on this log was a GD gorilla, not Bigfoot. He said gorilla, which I found very fascinating. We went in and measured it. They were 47 feet away. That's pretty damn close.
That's real close.
But anyway, what ensued was that when he saw this, and the dog was fixed on this thing. They were staring daggers at each other. He said this gorilla, with every breath as it exhaled, was grunting. It was like, he shoved the dog off the log, and the two of them ran over Hillendale. Again, no trail. What took them 45 minutes to get in took about 20 to get out. But this was the weird thing. This gorilla took chase. And I don't mean escort. I don't mean escorted them out. I think maybe technically it did, but it scared the hell out of both him and the dog. He kept talking about the dog getting ahead of him and him grabbing the dog and pulling it back behind him. They got to a spot because we went in there, me and another friend, after the fact to do our investigation, and there's one spot where you have to cross this cliff that kind of goes out for about 80 feet over this river below, the Roaring River. And it's a 3-point contact all the way across. That he stopped there. They got there maybe in 10 minutes, turned around to see if it was still following it, and they saw it standing closer to the river. And when they locked eyes again, this thing charged them a second time. But I believe it was a bluff charge. I think it was an intimidation kind of thing. That's kind of what I guess I'd categorize that as an aggressive escort. But you don't hear that very often. They don't, this. I can only imagine that this was one of those cases where there was probably others around, maybe some adolescents or even youngsters or whatever, that they had gotten too close, and this thing did not want anything to do with it. Just get the hell out. But that's kind of unusual. Like I say, most of the time they just go, they're like, oh, crap, we're out of here. Because now it's like, oh, hell, do we got to move camp? We got to move on because now they're coming in here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of extensive research in that Roaring River wilderness area. It is a true wilderness. It's nothing, it's a pretty big area. None of it's ever been logged, and there's no roads gone through it at all. Oregon's got a lot of those wilderness that's just exactly the way it was a million years ago, and I think that's key to where to look for them, because it's just a trail less traveled, if you know what I mean.
Right. Sounds exactly like where I'd want to live, away from people.
Exactly. Off the grid.
Yeah, exactly. And once again this week, we have a few bloopers at the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that. And make sure you're leaving a comment down below, letting me know how I'm doing. That sounded like crap, so this is going to be a blooper. The amount of support I've been getting over the last couple weeks has been absolutely incredible. And I just want to thank everyone who's hit subscribe, who's hit liked, who's shared, commented. That makes it all worthwhile. And I swallowed in the middle of that, and that isn't going to... Tonight's show is a good one. We have Todd Neiss, Bigfoot experience. Everyone knows that I like doing collabs, but I also like just appearing on other... Why did I do that? What was that? Tonight's show is a good one. We have Todd Neiss on the show. He's a Bigfoot experiencer and researcher, and this will be part 1 of 2 parts. as we went for almost 2 hours during the interview. So be looking out here and that's it for tonight. Once again, I'd like to thank Todd for coming on the show, and be looking out for part 2 coming next week. Have a good night, everyone.
Shadow in the pines lurking in the dusky air. Bigfoot stomps through the woods like he don't care. Lights in the sky flash green then blue. Aliens descending with a secret or two. Whispers in the breeze, cold fingers down your spine. Ghosts in the graveyard, twisting through time. Eyes wide open in the dead of night. The myths and monsters giving one hell of a fright. Oh, Miss Monsters and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Oh, Miss Monsters and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Down by the bayou, you hear a raspy growl. Swamp gas glowing as the coyotes howl. A UFO zipping just above the trees, grabbing hold of wonder like a southern summer breeze. Some call it crazy, others call it a lie. But listen real close as the truth passes by. The lines are blurry, the story's bold. John Methenkamp spins them into southern gold. Apparitions dancing in the smoky haze. Legends of the deep south told in hollers and bays. Bigfoot runs free, chasing shadow dreams. Aliens keep secrets like moonlight beams. No. Down by the bayou, you hear a raspy growl. Swamp gas glowing as the coyotes howl. A UFO zipping just above the trees, grabbing hold